Story 1. It was just another ordinary school day, indistinguishable from any other. I found myself in the 7th period, math class, when the clock ticked closer to 10:30 at night. We were about to wrap up for the evening, and I felt a wave of happiness wash over me because this was the last day before the weekend break. In other classes, exams were being held, but our class was different. Our math teacher was jovial and loved to joke with us, making the class incredibly enjoyable. I was sitting next to my friend Malak, whispering to her as the lesson continued. The teacher didn't seem to mind our chatter, and the atmosphere was relaxed and quiet. But then, abruptly, the serenity was shattered by the shrill sound of an alarm bell. Laughter halted instantly, and our eyes darted toward the loudspeakers. The principal's voice crackled through, announcing a state of emergency. A dangerous intruder was inside the school. At first, we all thought it was just a drill, like the ones they occasionally conducted. But something felt different this time. A hidden sense of dread crept into our hearts. Yet, I was convinced there was no real reason to panic, especially since our teacher showed no signs of fear. As is customary in such situations, the teacher turned off the classroom lights and instructed us to huddle in a corner, away from the doors and windows. Our classroom had 2 doors, one leading to the front corridor and the other to the back. The back door was ajar, forgotten by the teacher in his haste. In that moment, Malak and I decided to seize the opportunity and slip out through the back door. We were convinced it was nothing serious, just a drill. Once we stepped outside, the corridor was unusually dark, and the entire school felt deserted. This unsettling feeling began to claw at me. I asked Malak, "If this is a drill, why is the power out?" We stood in the corridor, unsure whether this was real or just our imagination. However, curiosity and youthful recklessness pushed us forward. Suddenly, we heard heavy footsteps approaching from a distance. Our hearts froze in fear. Was someone actually here? We dashed to the nearest bathroom and hid inside, thinking we could evade whoever was walking in the corridor. We sat in silence for 5 minutes, but the sound of footsteps returned, closer this time. My heart raced violently, each thump echoing in my ears. The footsteps drew nearer until they stopped right in front of the bathroom door. Malak trembled beside me, whispering, "It can't be just a drill anymore. Someone must have entered the school." Yet, I was still skeptical. Without warning, the main bathroom door creaked open. A figure stepped in slowly, their voice strange, as if they were searching for something. I was on the verge of standing up and apologizing, assuming it was a teacher, but Malak grabbed my arm tightly, her voice shaking. "I don't think that's a teacher. Wait." Seconds turned into an eternity as I contemplated every possible escape route. But before I could make a move, the person who entered the bathroom began banging violently on the stall door where we were hiding. The sound was aggressive, as if they were trying to break the door down. They started to scream hysterically, their laughter sounding more like a horrifying nightmare. I froze in place, feeling as though everything was ending. The man was trying to force the door open with a terrifying intensity. Just then, we heard the main bathroom door swing open once more. Another figure entered. It was our math teacher, the one we thought was still in the classroom. He confronted the strange man, and we could hear their struggle. In that moment, I made the decision to help. I flung the door open and charged at the man. And together with the teacher, we managed to restrain him until the police arrived. After the officers came, we discovered that this man was a serial killer who had escaped from a psychiatric hospital. He had been hiding in the school, waiting for an opportunity to pounce on someone. Since that day, I've never looked at fire drills the same way again. In the days that followed, the story of the incident spread like wildfire. My school turned into a site of intrigue and terror. News crews flooded the place, interviewing students, teachers, and parents. Each person recounted their version of the event, but no one could quite capture the essence of fear we experienced that night. I often found myself replaying the events in my mind, each moment etched in vivid detail. I would wake up in the dead of night, drenched in sweat, haunted by the echo of that man's laughter. It felt as if he was lurking in the shadows, waiting for a chance to strike again. Malak and I became inseparable after that night. We often found comfort in each other's company, sharing stories and fears as we tried to make sense of what happened. We avoided the school bathrooms at all costs, preferring to walk home together rather than risk being alone in those haunting hallways. As the weeks passed, the school implemented strict security measures. Doors that used to remain unlocked were now reinforced with heavy locks. Teachers received training on how to handle emergency situations, and drills became more frequent. Each time the alarm sounded, I felt my heart race, a sense of déjà vu washing over me. One evening, as Malak and I were walking home from school, we stumbled upon a group of students discussing the incident. They had created a chilling urban legend surrounding the night of the intruder. "They say he still roams the halls," one student whispered, waiting for his next victim. I laughed nervously, trying to dismiss their tales as just that, stories. But deep down, I felt the weight of their words. It was hard to forget the piercing eyes of the man who had invaded our safe haven. The thought that he could still be out there, lurking, sent shivers down my spine. Eventually, our school year came to an end and summer arrived like a breath of fresh air. Malik and I were relieved to leave the memories of that night behind us, but the darkness lingered like a stubborn shadow. We made a pact to forget, to move on, but every creak in the night reminded me of that fateful evening. As summer turned to fall, the school reopened its doors, filled with new students unaware of the horrors that had unfolded. The walls, once echoing with laughter, now seemed to whisper secrets of the past. I could feel the tension in the air, the weight of unsaid words hanging over us. On the first day of school, as I walked through the familiar hallways, I was struck by an overwhelming sense of déjà vu. Each step echoed in my mind, each shadow cast by the fluorescent lights reminding me of that dreadful night. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. Weeks passed, and life continued, but I could never forget the details of that terrifying night. It seeped into my dreams, transforming into a nightmarish loop that haunted my subconscious. The face of the intruder morphed into every dark corner of my imagination, and no amount of reassurance could chase him away. One evening, as I sat in my room, the weight of the memories overwhelmed me. I decided to confront my fear. I gathered my courage and wrote a letter to the principal, suggesting a school assembly to discuss safety measures and mental health support for students. I believed that if we shared our fears, we could lessen their power over us. The assembly took place a week later. The principal spoke about the importance of being vigilant and looking out for one another. I could feel the collective anxiety in the room, a palpable fear that lingered in the air. As students shared their experiences, I realized I wasn't alone. Each story echoed my own, intertwining our fates in a tapestry of fear and resilience. That night, as I lay in bed, I felt a strange sense of relief. Confronting my fears had lightened the burden I carried. Malak and I began to talk more openly about our experiences, sharing our nightmares and fears. It helped us heal, piece by piece. One evening, as we were talking about our plans for the future, Malak asked, "Do you think he's really gone?" Her eyes were filled with uncertainty, and I could see the lingering shadows of fear that danced behind her gaze. I wanted to reassure her, to tell her that we were safe now, but deep down, I knew the truth. "Maybe he's gone for now," I replied, forcing a smile. "But we can't let fear control us. We have to keep living our lives." Summer turned into fall, and we began to find joy in the little things again: laughter, friendship, and the promise of new beginnings. But that night, the echoes of the past remained, a reminder of our vulnerability. In the quiet of the night, as the wind howled outside my window, I learned to embrace the fear. It was a part of me now, woven into my very being. I wouldn't let it dictate my life, but I also wouldn't forget the lessons it taught me. As I closed my eyes, I whispered a silent promise to myself. I would be vigilant, I would be brave, and most importantly, I would never let the darkness take away my light. In the end, The terror we faced that night forged a bond between Malak and me that was unbreakable. We learned to support one another through the darkest times, to face our fears together. The shadows of that horrifying night would always linger. Story 2. On a cold and lengthy night, a young man was returning from school after a grueling day. It was well past midnight, and he felt an overwhelming exhaustion wash over him. All he wanted was to get home. He had to wait a long time on the station platform for the train to arrive. The atmosphere was eerily quiet, with darkness enveloping everything around him. Finally, the train appeared, moving slowly as if it were emerging from the depths of time. From the outside, it looked perfectly normal, but once inside, the young man felt something was off. The interior had an unsettling aura, as if it belonged to an era long gone, with worn-out floors and flickering lights that struggled to stay lit. He sat in his seat and glanced around. The train was entirely empty. This unnerved him, since he was accustomed to seeing a few passengers even at this late hour. Yet, he couldn't comprehend why he was alone in the train, and the unease began to creep into his heart. As the train glided silently through the stations, he noticed something strange happening at the back of the carriage. He couldn't pinpoint what it was, but a sense of unusual movement caught his attention. Suddenly, another passenger joined him. This new passenger was unlike anyone he had ever seen. Their face was grotesquely disfigured, their features obscured by the dim light. The young man froze in place, watching as the creature slowly approached him. With every step it took, the lights above flickered ominously. Each flash revealed the figure in a different spot, closer than before. Panic began to surge within him, and he struggled to convince himself that it was merely an illusion brought on by exhaustion. But the truth was far more sinister. The creature was no figment of his imagination. It approached menacingly until it stood directly in front of him, causing him to leap from his seat. He bolted toward the door, but the light suddenly extinguished completely, plunging him into total darkness. He could feel the creature behind him, its heavy breaths closing in, tearing through the silence. He attempted to scream, but no sound emerged. Time seemed to stretch painfully. Then suddenly, a hand gripped his shoulder with terrifying force. As he slowly turned around, the creature loomed directly behind him, its glowing red eyes burning with malice. He fought to break free, but its grip was far too strong. Just then, the sound of the train shifted as if something else was about to happen. Meanwhile, chaos was unfolding at the school. A group of mysterious clowns had begun to threaten the safety of the students. The young man had heard rumors about these clowns, who roamed the streets at night, committing horrific murders. Some of his friends laughed it off, dismissing it as a prank or a real-life horror film. But that night, everything changed. One of his friends challenged the clowns online, mocking them on their social media page. In retaliation, he received a direct threat: "We'll come to your school at exactly 11 p.m. When the principal learned of the situation, he acted swiftly. The school doors were locked at 10:30 p.m. and all parents were notified not to worry. But what no one anticipated was that the threats would materialize into reality. At exactly 11 p.m., the school's alarm sirens blared, and the principal's voice echoed over the intercom, urging everyone to remain vigilant. The teachers hurried to secure the doors and windows, turning off the lights in a desperate attempt to keep the students safe. At that moment, the young man sat in his classroom, surrounded by friends who were beginning to feel genuine fear. After about 40 minutes, strange events began to unfold. A green light from the alarm began to flash, and the air conditioning in the classroom started to shut down slowly. Suddenly, the entire school lost power, and darkness engulfed the place. The most terrifying moment was when they heard the sound of glass shattering and heavy footsteps coming from the basement. It wasn't just one person. It sounded like a large group was approaching. The girls in the classroom began to sob in sheer terror, their cries echoing off the walls, but everyone was doing their best to remain calm. Finally, the menacing clown appeared at the classroom door, banging furiously as if trying to break it down. It thrust its hand through the shattered glass, attempting to open the door from the inside. The young man and his friends watched in horror, frozen in place, unable to move. Suddenly, their teacher decided to take action. Grabbing a knife he kept in his desk, he lunged toward the door and stabbed the clown in the arm. The clown screamed in pain and quickly withdrew its hand, retreating from the door. Hours dragged on as the sounds of police sirens filled the air, and the process of capturing the clowns began. They apprehended one, but the rest vanished into the night, leaving behind a trail of fear and terror etched into the hearts of the students. When the young man finally returned home, he couldn't shake off the haunting memories of that terrifying night. He always felt as if the nightmare had not ended, and that the clowns might return at any moment, this time armed with even deadlier weapons. The chilling night wrapped around him like a thick fog seeping into his bones. As he stood alone at the deserted station, the wind howled through the tracks, almost as if it was warning him of the horrors that awaited. The train's arrival felt like a sinister omen, one that would forever alter the course of his life. The train's exterior was painted with layers of grime, but its interior was what truly sent shivers down his spine. The flickering lights cast shadows that danced eerily along the walls, creating an atmosphere of despair. It was as if the train carried the memories of those who had traveled before, each with their own story of dread and terror. He took a deep breath and settled into his seat, his heart pounding in rhythm with the train's wheels clattering on the tracks. As the train lurched forward, he glanced out the window, hoping to catch a glimpse of the familiar landscapes. But the world outside was an abyss of darkness, swallowing everything in its path. It was as if he was trapped in a void, a reality detached from the one he knew. He shook his head, trying to clear his mind, but the unease grew stronger with every passing moment. His gaze shifted to the other end of the carriage, where shadows seemed to flicker and move. It was there he first spotted the grotesque figure. At first, it was just a silhouette, distorted and ominous. But as it moved closer, the details became horrifyingly clear. The figure had an unsettling grin plastered across its face, eyes hollow and dark, reflecting the dim light like two bottomless pits of despair. With each step it took, the lights overhead flickered more violently, almost as if they too were afraid of what was approaching. The young man's heart raced, pounding against his ribcage as fear clutched at his throat. He tried to convince himself it was just his imagination playing tricks on him, but deep down, he knew the truth. He was not alone. The creature finally reached him, its breath foul and heavy, smelling of decay and death. It leaned in closer, its breath sending a wave of nausea through him. In that instant, every instinct screamed at him to run. The air grew thick and suffocating, as if the train itself was trying to contain the terror that lurked within. Suddenly, the train jolted violently, and the lights went out entirely, plunging him into darkness. He could hear the creature breathing behind him, each inhale and exhale echoing in the stillness. Panic surged through him, and he knew he had to escape. He felt along the walls, searching for the door, but the darkness was blinding, and fear clouded his mind. Finally, he found the door and flung it open, but it led him to a world far worse than he had imagined. Outside, the night was alive with the sound of laughter, inhuman, mocking laughter that echoed through the empty streets. As he stumbled out of the train, he realized he was no longer at the station, but in an entirely different realm. The landscape before him was twisted and grotesque, with distorted buildings looming in the distance. Shadows danced in the corners of his vision, whispering secrets that sent chills down his spine. He turned back to the train, but it was gone, vanished into thin air, leaving only a hollow echo of its existence. Desperation clawed at him as he began to wander through this nightmare, each step heavier than the last. The laughter grew louder, a cacophony of chaos that reverberated in his ears, drowning out all rational thought. "Is anyone there?" he called out, but his voice was swallowed by the darkness. He felt utterly alone, as if the world itself had conspired to trap him in this living hell. Just when he thought all hope was lost, He spotted a flickering light in the distance. It beckoned him, a promise of safety amidst the horror. As he approached, he realized it was a group of figures huddled together, their faces obscured by the shadows. Relief flooded through him, but it quickly turned to dread as he recognized the unmistakable silhouettes of clowns. Their grotesque laughter filled the air, and they turned their gaze toward him. Story 3. At the age of 18 or 19, I experienced a bizarre and chilling series of events that forever altered my perception of reality. I was still living with my parents in their home, and we were hosting a student from another town named Sfax. She lived with us for a token rent, and we quickly became close friends, though I often felt a protective instinct toward her, as if she were a little sister. One fateful evening, my friends from school threw a party, and my parents forbade us from attending. Determined to have a taste of freedom, Sfax and I decided to sneak out without alerting anyone. We returned home in the dead of night, around 1 a.m., tiptoeing up the stairs, careful not to wake anyone. I was utterly exhausted as I reached my room, and the moment I flopped onto my bed, I drifted off to sleep. Suddenly, I was jolted awake by a peculiar noise emanating from my room. Drowsiness clung to me, and I yearned to sink back into sleep, but curiosity compelled me to open my eyes and survey my surroundings. Everything appeared normal, but then the sound repeated itself. Concentrating harder, I realized the noise came from my wardrobe. The door began to creak open slowly, and that's when a strange image emerged. A creature was crawling out from inside. Its body resembled that of a human, but its head was unmistakably that of an animal. The sight sent icy terror coursing through me. I had recently experienced sleep paralysis, during which I encountered bizarre visions and felt helpless. But that night, I was sure I wasn't imagining things. The wardrobe door swung shut on its own. I had never faced anything like this before, yet every time I had a bout of sleep paralysis, fear gripped me. Suddenly, the creature returned to open the wardrobe again, this time moving cautiously, as if it were afraid of waking me. It approached my bed, and I watched in horror as it gazed at me with a cautious expression. I tried to close my eyes, hoping to fall asleep again. But just as I did, I heard footsteps approaching my door. A chill ran down my spine. Something was terribly wrong. Typically, such creatures would vanish into the dark, but this one seemed to be heading straight for the door like an ordinary person. Suddenly, I regained the ability to move, and for the first time, I felt like I was in the real world. I climbed out of bed and took slow, careful steps toward the door. When I opened it, I found the creature standing in the hallway, opening Sfax's bedroom door. It was the same figure that had emerged from the wardrobe. At that moment, realization struck me. This was no mere figment of my imagination, but terror gripped me nonetheless, and I was at a loss for what to do. "Who are you?" I stammered, my voice trembling, but all I got in response was the sound of something crashing to the ground. In the dark, I couldn't tell what it was. Fortunately, the light switch was within reach. I flipped it on, and I was stunned by what I saw. It wasn't a strange creature at all, but a regular person wearing a bizarre mask and clutching a wooden stick. Just then, Sfax screamed from her room, revealing that she had also been awakened by the creature. Upon hearing her scream, the masked man realized that things were spiraling out of control. He bolted down the stairs toward the exit. I stood frozen in shock, my heart racing. I had no idea who this man was or why he was there. What did he want with Sfax? Thankfully, my father emerged from his room just then. "Huh? There's someone in my room," I shouted. He rushed to my room, grabbed his weapon, and darted downstairs after the intruder. But before he could catch up, we heard the sound of a car engine. The masked man had started his vehicle in front of our home and sped away into the dark night. My mind was a whirlwind of confusion. Who was this person? Why did he want Sfax? We called the police and relayed everything that had happened, but they couldn't provide any logical explanation. They informed us that this man had been planning to abduct Sfax and that he had detailed plans for it. Days passed, and we lived in a state of perpetual terror. Each time we recalled that night, fear slithered into our hearts. Sfax decided to return to her hometown shortly thereafter and never came back. She was utterly terrified by the experience, and I couldn't blame her for wanting to escape. As time went by, I found myself lost in deep contemplation. Was this man insane? Or was he searching for something specific? The more I pondered, the greater my confusion grew. It was as if he knew everything about Sfax, as if he had been watching us for a long time. With time, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed in our lives since that night. I began hearing whispers in the night, sensing that something was watching me. Even in the days following the incident, I would wake up in the middle of the night, feeling a presence in my room, as though I were never truly alone. Driven by curiosity and fear, I started investigating more about the masked man. My friends at school began talking about legends surrounding a strange figure that appeared in our neighborhoods. I heard stories about abductions of girls, and while they sounded like mere urban myths, I felt an undeniable truth lurking behind these tales. I visited the places where these stories originated, conversing with some locals. Many of them had similar experiences, making me feel less alone in this dread. They spoke of a dense fog that rolled in at night and how some people had never returned home after venturing out. A sense of unease crept over me, yet I was resolute in discovering the truth. I started exploring at night, hoping to uncover any clues that might shed light on what had transpired. With each passing night, my fear intensified, and the stories echoed in my mind as if they were lurking in every corner, waiting for me. Then one night, as I was preparing to head home, I spotted something peculiar. A faint light flickered in the nearby woods. My curiosity urged me closer. As I approached, I saw a group of individuals wearing masks. They were gathered around a small fire, speaking in hushed tones. My heart raced. I felt compelled to stay, even as fear gripped me. What were they doing? Were they connected to the man who had tried to abduct Sfax? Were they part of those terrifying legends I had heard? I decided to hide and observe them, and soon I began to catch snippets of their conversation. Their voices were laden with fear and mystery. In that moment, I felt as if I had stepped into another world, a world shrouded in secrets and terrifying things I couldn't begin to comprehend. When they became aware of my presence, terror surged through me. I bolted away as fast as I could, but that strange world refused to release its grip on me. I knew I had to confront this matter. It was a part of my fate, and any attempt to flee would be futile. Since that night, my perspective shifted dramatically. There was something more ominous and dangerous than I had ever imagined. I had to face my fears, and when I returned home, I felt different. I was no longer afraid. I was determined to uncover the truth behind everything that had happened. In those moments, I prepared myself to return to the woods, to confront those who held the secrets. There was something larger waiting for me, and I was ready to unearth it, even if it cost me everything. Story 4. My name is Khalid, and I have a particular passion for reading strange stories about terrifying creatures. I searched countless places hoping to encounter one of these eerie beings. One day, I decided to write an article about a peculiar creature rumored to dwell in a well. Everyone said it tried to kill anyone who approached its lair. There were odd photographs of it, and they only heightened my excitement to visit the site. I reassured myself that I would be prepared. No creature could harm me. After much contemplation, I resolved to venture out and discover this creature for myself. I booked a plane ticket and packed my bag. The following day, I was on my way to that mysterious town. I had a feeling I would find evidence of its existence, yet I had no idea what awaited me. Upon arrival, I spoke to the locals, who directed me to the creature's supposed dwelling. A small child even claimed to have seen it and took me to the location. I reached an abandoned area, where an old, crumbling house stood, still cloaked in an aura of mystery. I imagined how this strange creature might live. The surrounding forest was known as a hunting ground, yet hunters avoided it, fearing the unknown being. I decided to camp in that forest for a few days to uncover the truth. I set up my tent and began preparing traps. I placed meat in random locations throughout the woods and set up surveillance cameras with alarms. After finishing all the arrangements, I crawled into my tent and decided to sleep. However, in the middle of the night, I suddenly woke to the sound of the alarm blaring. My heart raced in terror. I rushed out of my tent, only to discover that one of the cameras had been shattered. At that moment, I realized I was in genuine danger. Thoughts of the swift creature that could move through the forest with ease filled my mind. Panic surged through me as I scrambled up a tree, hoping it wouldn't be able to spot me. I cautiously climbed the tree and perched on a high branch, surveying my surroundings. My gun was in hand, ready for any unexpected turn of events. Suddenly, I saw the creature darting beneath the tree with an uncanny speed. It moved like a shadow, and I couldn't take the shot. As I scanned for the creature, I felt something brush against my foot from behind. I lost control of my fear and leaped from the tree, engulfed in sheer terror. When I opened my eyes, I found myself face to face with the creature. Its appearance was horrifying. It was so thin that its bones protruded and its teeth were sharp as blades. The creature reached out towards me, and I was frozen in sheer fright. In that crucial moment, another figure appeared, brandishing a weapon and rescuing me from the predicament. I had no idea who this person was, but I was immensely grateful. I wondered what the creature would have done to me if this savior hadn't arrived. It seemed the creature had an appetite for flesh, and I was just another meal to him. After that harrowing incident, I realized I couldn't stay in that place any longer. I hurriedly packed my belongings, but my rescuer urged me to remain calm and not to move hastily. He warned that the creature knew another person was in the area and would return to search for me. A chill crept down my spine. There had to be something more than just one creature lurking in this forest. As we hid, the man began speaking to me. He revealed that the creature was not just an ordinary being. It was an ancient entity that had existed in the forest for centuries. He explained that it was attracted to human souls, believing I had come to take it with me to another realm. I realized I was caught in the middle of a mysterious legend. This man knew much about the creature. He had been tracking it for a long time and suspected a connection to the spirit world. He pointed out that the creature could only be seen at night and that it appeared when it sensed danger. This information only deepened the horror of the situation. We decided to devise a plan to escape. We had no desire to confront the creature again, especially after realizing it wasn't alone. Other entities resided in the forest, harboring dark secrets that sent chills down our spines. While we plotted, we heard footsteps approaching us. The sounds quickened as if something was closing in. Panic seeped into my bones. I took a deep breath and began contemplating how to act. The man said, "If you see the creature again, don't try to flee. Stay calm. You might have a chance to survive." But this was easier said than done. Suddenly, the creature reappeared before us, angrier than ever. Its teeth were bared, and its eyes glowed with malice. In that moment, I understood I was standing against something beyond my comprehension. We started to run, and the faster we sprinted, the quicker the creature pursued us. I feared I wouldn't escape, but I was determined not to give in. We employed every trick we knew to stay away from the creature. We hid behind trees and ducked behind rocks, but it seemed we were not alone in this forest. Strange sounds echoed from every direction, as if the woods conspired against us. Fear clawed at my heart, yet I held on to the belief that I would survive. Eventually, we stumbled into an open area, completely exhausted. We decided to confront the creature rather than flee. As it approached us, I realized it was not just a creature, it was a being trapped between two worlds. Though it seemed ancient, there was something human about it. I noticed scars on its body, revealing it had suffered. At that moment, I understood that I had to face my fears. I began speaking to it calmly, hoping to connect. As time passed, my fear began to fade, and I started to see the humanity in the creature. As time went on, we exchanged words. I discovered that the creature needed help and was as afraid of humans as we were of it. I believed it had lived in isolation, protecting its territory from any threats. When I realized that fear was the root of this misunderstanding, I was able to assist it in returning to its rightful place. When I returned home, I couldn't forget what had happened. This experience had changed my life. I no longer felt afraid of strange creatures. Instead, I sought ways to understand and help them. I realized every creature has a story, and even the most terrifying beings could become friends. Since that day, I began writing stories about understanding and peace, rather than fear and horror. Thus, my encounter with the terrifying creature in the forest transformed me forever, granting me a new perspective on life and the world around me.